Hi, I'm Catherine Hurst from Catherine Hurst Contemporary Crafts, and I'm going to teach you some knitting techniques today. I'm going to show you how to cast off, both casting off using only the knit stitch and casting off in pattern, which combines knit and purl stitches. Casting off is the method that's used to close the loops along the top of a piece of knitting. If you just pulled this off the needle without casting it off and pulled on the yarn, the whole thing would unravel. So we need to close these so that everything is secure. To cast off, you're going to start by knitting the first 2 stitches in the row like normal. So yarn to the back, inserting from the left, and we're knitting those first 2 stitches. You're then going to take your left needle and you're going to insert it across the front of the first stitch that you knit, from left to right across the front of that loop. And then you're going to take that stitch and lift it over the second stitch and off both needles so that it hangs to the front of the second stitch you knit. And then you're going to knit the next stitch in the row. So you've got 2 on your right hand needle. You're going to take your left needle and lift this stitch over the last stitch and off the needle. Again, knit another stitch. You should only ever have 1 or 2 stitches on your right hand needle when you're casting off. Use my left needle to pick this stitch up and lift it over and off the needle. All the knitting across this row has already been cast off. This is still to cast off. So far I've been using only the knit stitch to cast off. But if you have a pattern like this one that combines knit and purl stitches, like this moss stitch, you might choose to cast off in pattern. That means you're going to knit the knit stitches and purl the purl stitches, or vice versa since this is moss stitch, while casting off throughout. So for example, this next stitch is a knit stitch, and since we're doing moss stitch, we would purl that. So we're going to bring this forward and purl this stitch. But we're still going to be casting off, lifting the stitch over and off between every stitch knitted or purled. So we need to knit the next stitch in the row to maintain our moss stitch pattern. And we're still lifting our stitches over and off to close as we go along. So purling the next stitch and lifting that stitch over and off, knitting. You want to cast off loosely because your cast off row doesn't stretch as much as the rest of your knitting, so you want to make sure that it lays flat and doesn't pinch in at the top. Okay, so I'm carrying on across the row, knitting and purling the stitches as appropriate, and this would work for any combined knit purl stitch pattern. So if you were doing ribbing or moss stitch or any combined pattern, you would still use this in pattern cast off method. And once you get to the last stitch, you're going to knit or purl it as appropriate. Lift this stitch over and off. So you've got 1 stitch remaining on the needle. Between both, you only have 1 stitch left. At that point, you're going to cut your yarn. Just get some scissors. Leaving a 4 to 6 inch or 10 centimeter tail. And then this tail that you've just created needs to pass through that last remaining loop to close that loop. So you can take your needle out of it, open that loop up just a little bit, and then that tail needs to pass through that loop. And you just pull to tighten. Okay, so that piece of knitting is now cast off. And that's how to cast off.